Welcome to the newly titled podcast from Magnetic Revenue Pathways. And we came up with that name because there's a lot of different ways for people to find a way to revenue, but geez, nobody can find one right now, it seems. We're all living in this time where there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn who say they know the answer to it, yet nobody seems to be able to get results. And so we created this show as a place for people to talk about that, right? So we can solve those problems together and really focus in on the guests that we have, how they're helping solve that problem today. Maybe some of the problems that they've had themselves, if they're like us and they're human beings with blood and veins in their body, they probably experienced LinkedIn to be nothing short of frustrating this past year. It's kind of like dating someone who's bipolar, I suppose, is what it's kind of felt like. You still love them, but you're not sure what's going to happen today. And so that's kind of what it's been like with LinkedIn. I have no experience in that, by the way, but I have empathy for those people who go through that because LinkedIn is one of those things where, gosh, I love it. You love it. Nathasha, you're a top social selling voice. Let's stop right there and go, what is your current view on LinkedIn as a pathway to revenue for founders, particularly in that 1 to 20 million space? Because let's just say there's a lot of them out there and there's a lot of them who aren't doing anything on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's a really good question because LinkedIn is not intuitive unless you've been on the platform for the last years and have followed it, like living, breathing it, so you understand it slightly. But once you start to understand it, of course, it changes. And so you can't pay attention to those vanity metrics, let's say. But as a source for getting revenue, it's super powerful. I mean, this is how I've closed all of my deals in the last years. Basically, like I don't cold call, I don't outbound email. It's all been through building relationships and networking on LinkedIn. Intentionally though, because I don't just like post for posting sakes or DM for DMing sakes, right? Like there's always an intention behind it.
Okay, so when did that intention start? Because everybody started somewhere, right? I always say my journey started in my car with my iPhone when someone I was working with said, now I want you to make your first video. And I was like, okay, I got to hire somebody. So it was pretty much like me going, hi, I'm looking to hire da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And it was the most boring video of all time. Right? I don't know why it didn't get more than, 100 views. And now I look back and go, geez, that was just 4 years ago,
Yeah.
And fast forward here, how was your journey started? Was it in a car? Was it this serendipitous moment? Tell us about it.
Sure. Yeah. My journey started completely out of fear. I landed a job as an SDR at a digital marketing firm back in 2017, 18. And I am an introvert. I also used to be super shy. So probably being an SDR was like the worst job I could have chosen. But I just come back from being in Argentina for 6 years. And so it was one of those things I'm from Bay Area, Palo Alto. My dad was in tech sales. My brother was in tech sales. I guess I'm going to land in tech sales, right? Problem is cold calling was not my jam. I was absolutely terrible at it. And I had a lot of nightmares and I was crying a tons. The problem is that I'm super competitive. And so I had to find a way to still hit my numbers because I can't lose. And so I discovered LinkedIn actually as a way to message people and then warm call them. For whatever reason, that felt a little bit better to me. And then from there, I sort of expanded on, well, this just feels much more natural to me of connecting with people versus just picking up the phone and doing that because I just felt like I was bothering people. And I know cold calling works. I've closed deals through cold calling. I just, deep down, it was crushing my soul.
It's kind of like, I'm single, so unfortunately this comes up a lot lately and Bryan has to hear about it. It's like the dating app world. If you had to say, you didn't want to be on the dating app. Instead, you wanted to have a little bit more of an intimate experience, maybe where you were yourself or whatever. And I found that frustration, right, too. I said to Bryan when I was on the dating apps, I'm like, this is just weird, And being someone who's in the algorithm business, of course, naturally curious, like how do you get aligned with these people in the universe who it says like they're for you, right? And LinkedIn's kind of doing the same thing. And certainly I want to traverse here and Bryan to dig deep into this. We've went on a journey into YouTube the last 3 months. We're not experts. I've challenged Bryan to go hire somebody who is an expert, right? Because that's what we do. That's what people do naturally to expand their business. YouTube is popping in a big way. And what we've seen in our data is that companies should be tripling, quadrupling, if not 10xing down into YouTube. And there's a few reasons why that we've found, and I want to get your thoughts on this. And then I think, Bryan, and you'll have some interesting dialogue from a creative standpoint because this is new to B2B, right?
Yeah.
And if we go and look at Mr. Beast thumbnails, like we don't know that that's going to work in B2B. What we know that works really well for Mr. Beast right? And then you look at those companies who maybe are accelerated in B2B, and the list is very short. Like, who's actually got something on video that's going to be something that when I'm scrolling through in bed is going to get me to actually act, not talk to me about how subject lines are more impactful in cold email. Like, that game is dead. Nobody wants to hear that anymore. We want to hear about solutions.
Yeah.
Is YouTube a channel that you've invested in? Is it a channel you use daily? Does it come up a lot with your clients? And then what the heck are you going to do about it?
It's a really good question. I am still new to video, even I'm normally behind the scenes. Like, this has been a hard transition for me to be on podcasts. I'm hosting my own podcast. I'm doing videos. I'm speaking more. And so video just in general has been like something very much out of my comfort zone. However, I realize that this is how you build trust with your audience. It's completely different from all the noise that you're finding on LinkedIn with so much content, so much fluff, so much whatever is going on LinkedIn too. And don't get me wrong, I love it still, but there is a lot of content being pushed out right now, and everyone's claiming they're experts, gurus, coaches, right? Those that actually do what they say they do are going to be the ones that actually succeed in this. But the best way to do that is by, I think, video. So I haven't fully explored it. I'm getting there. I'm like dipping my toes in and being on more podcasts and such. Hence how you got me on this, right?
Well, it's funny. Like, that was one of the key reasons that I ended up, joining Steve with Magnetic. Video is how a lot of our audience consumes content. That's not how I consume content. I read stuff occasionally, but it doesn't matter what I like. It matters what my audience like, what my customers like. And so I think that's and I'd love to hear your thoughts on making that like shift and starting to think more from that customer perspective.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, actually, you say that, because I used to work at Forbes Books. And so after I left tech sales, I somehow landed a job.
One of you guys. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. You guys are good SDRs. You guys are good SDRs.
So I ran that team for a year.
Okay. Kudos to you.
Not certain of some of the messaging that was going on there, but that was my first take into the book publishing world, because by no means do I have a right to be in book publishing, but I understood the power of personal branding, thought leadership to drive business growth and sales. And the thing I realized, though, is that a book is just one piece to a bigger mission, message, movement, right? And so you can't just look at your content as, I'm going to push something out on LinkedIn and that's it. It's not going to help. It's going to be a part of it, but that's not going to be as impactful as if you look at the whole wheel of how you can hit all of your audience.
Well, you brought up an interesting topic, right? So, Bryan, let's dive into what we deem as revenue pathways, right? To consolidate it into a word or a series of words that people could use. So, blogs, YouTube, LinkedIn posts, outbound email. Bryan, that list gets long, right? And Bryan knows that because he has to manage me going, hey, what about this? And he's like, oh my God, this gets extensive. Talk to us about those pathways to revenue. And when you talk about a client, how do you kind of audit them and say, what are you doing today? What are you not doing? And then how do you determine what they should be doing?
Yeah. So the way that I work with clients right now is specifically looking at personal branding with a sales lens. The thing is that many people used to think of personal branding as sort of ego, vanity driven, or a want to have, not a need to have. Yeah. And so what I ask first is, what are your Q1 goals? What are your 2024 goals? And let's make sure that all the activity you do align with those goals so that you're staying motivated because you are seeing results. And this doesn't mean posting every single day or, messaging outbound left and right to whoever. It's about being intentional of who you're connecting with, who you're following, who you're engaging with, who you're commenting with. Those types of activities are just as important. But in this case, to answer your question, I guess I'm focusing on LinkedIn specifically, but with not the traditional messaging or just posting, right?
I found the most powerful thing on YouTube to be in my learning journey is this sort of journey. Right. So, Bryan, talk to me about when you hop onto YouTube, it's not about finding the one video. Right. It's about finding the creator, call it, that you're going to click into their channel or start getting them in the algorithm where now you're into this story. And the people I've seen do it really well, Bryan, and I've talked to you about this a lot lately. They hook you in and you're in the story, right? And now it's like, all right, well, welcome back. You're probably finding your feeling this today, right? So if you are, here's the 3 topics we're going to cover and 2 ways to handle them. It's very instructive. It's very journey driven. And now I'm going to click the link. You got me, right? You got me in the journey. And I look at these companies, they come talk to us and they go, yeah, I don't know why it's not working. And I'm like, geez, I don't know. Let's go look at your YouTube channel and just say, if that's the one thing that you corrected, you could stand a fighting chance in the world called the internet. Bryan, how are you viewing this journey? Because it was, again, new to you coming in. What have you learned about it? And Nathasha, let's talk about this because we're doubling down on it. And so I think let's talk about more of the extensive story that you need to tell those people as a business, that when you want them to come to you, how do they get to know Nathasha over time versus one post or a text post?
Like the thing that led us to Revenue Pathways, and this is the experience that I've been through, is I got sick of calling it a marketing channel. Channels are passive and you can switch it anytime you want and you just like get talked at, which, the way that we describe things is important. If we're thinking about email as a channel, it means that we're just forcing the message upon them. But a pathway, it takes active participation in it. Just like LinkedIn can't be just a post and forget it sort of thing, like you've said. Like you need to be commenting, you need to be building your network carefully, you need to be engaging and not just talking at people. But I think the thing that has become more and more interesting, because I came from obviously the written word background, getting into this multimedia world, it's changed the way that I think about the platform that you're on. So like Nathasha, you already brought up about how there's just a ton of noise on LinkedIn. But then Steve, you were mentioning when you go to YouTube, you just go down a rabbit hole of that same creator once you've found them. But I would love to hear, with that in mind of active versus passive participation, what do you think the biggest gap is between what brands and, leaders and CEOs are doing on LinkedIn versus what they should be doing?
So I think that there's still, like, we say this lightly of like, people buy from people. We say it all the time, right? But I think a lot of leaders don't like fully grasp what that means. It's like, if I'm hearing from you, Bryan, I know I'm learning something, but if I'm hearing from your business, your organization, the government, I'm being sold to or marketed to. My guard is up. There's a barrier there. And so there's still this huge disconnect that people want to hear from people. And it's not about your stories are relevant, of course, of your personal life, but how are you going to provide value to your ideal client and tell it in a way that resonates with them? Like going back to this dating analogy, your profile should basically be your professional dating profile and talk to that one person you're trying to get in, right? Yeah. And I think there's just a huge disconnect that we still see LinkedIn as your digital CV or resume, right? Yeah. And leaders stay behind the scenes still, and it's not working. It's not going to work moving forward.
I'm going to argue the point, and just that, not even for the fun of the show, and with all due respect, I don't think people buy from people. I think people buy when they feel understood. And people right now have the biggest ability to convey a sense of understanding, right? And in business, we don't understand shit. Like, we understand the money we got to make, the pipeline we create, and then we ramrod the hell out of everybody and say, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? And everybody's kind of like, it is so obvious that game is played out. Nathasha, I want to talk about, let's talk about the mid-pipeline journey, because as I'm talking and going back to YouTube, I didn't click the link and then buy, right? I clicked the link. I followed the videos for 2 weeks. I dove in deep. I chose the person I wanted to follow out of 100 or so, right? And even last night, right? I'm going to bed. What do? I get an alert on my mobile phone that says, so-and-so is doing a live right now, right? Oh, I'm interested, right? Because this is somebody I'm following right now. It's an issue I'm currently facing. What do? I join the live. I'm listening to this. I'm going, this sounds familiar. And I've heard this person talk now a lot. And then all of a sudden, I realized I had a question. I didn't want to book the $300 an hour meeting to go back to this coach, because I was like, man, it's just one question. They have a high value to me. I've got a problem. They've identified it, right? But I've already paid them $300. But I had this other question, right? And I couldn't find my answers in their video. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because now you're in this content journey going, where's that one video with the thing that they said? And I realize on YouTube, and Bryan and Nathasha, this is where I think it gets really interesting in B2B, because now we're talking about a revenue pathway. that seems selfish, but there was this little button that said super whatever. I could jump to the front of the line if I paid money. And it started to say, hey, if you want to ask a question right now, it's going to be $99. If you want to wait 5 minutes, it's $29. And I was like, God, I got to go to bed. Like, I don't really want to ask this question, but I don't want to spend $99. So I said, okay, I'm just going to roll the dice. I don't know how many people are in front of me. $29.99. And he goes, all right, Steve. And the next question, I was like, I felt like I was a caller in 8th grade, like requesting a love song or something. And I got my question answered, and I was like, holy shit, YouTube. Holy shit, YouTube. That is not happening on LinkedIn, right? So maybe I got a little overboard there, but that's where I went to bed just brimming with excitement about YouTube, because I'm like, this is what B2B needs right now.
Well, I have to say, I'm like so surprised, actually. I don't use YouTube at all. I know it's like a very common platform, but I haven't used it since like music videos before Spotify.
Oh,
basically.
God. Natasha, let's book a flight. Bryan and you are going to sit in a room for 6 hours. We're literally going to sit and learn about YouTube, and you're going to walk away and you're going to change your entire business model. It's
well,
that
I'm
crazy.
curious. I'm curious about that, because as I mentioned to you, I just launched my own business, and so I'm figuring out everything I've been doing right now is sort of behind the scenes, but I don't know yet what my plan is.
Well, you're like every other business owner, right? So
yeah,
you
right.
You have the same problem your customers do. You're going, gosh, I've got to grow. I've got to choose some pathways. I've got to invest in the right things. Some people pitch me. I'm on some podcasts and they pitch me. That sucks. But our model is this, and I want to get your opinion on it. Bryan and I sat down and like you, we're going through this whole idea of like, what are we going to do? What is our message? How can we make it clear? And we came up with this concept that, to your point, people don't buy from a single pathway or this one interaction. And we came up with a triangle. And the triangle, if you think about Pink Floyd, great band. So envision this triangle. And on the bottom left pillar of that is outbound, right? Where that's what we've been doing. It's not really working, but we've always got to do it, right? You got to get out of your house and go walk down the street. Not everybody's going to come to your door. The second pillar is, call it content media, everything we just talked about, right? How do you get that presence there to attract new customers, push pipeline along, build community with existing customers, webinars, etc. The third pillar is where we want to plant on right now. And Bryan, this is where I think our aha moment was. Mm-hmm. And Alex Hormozi, like him, hate him or not, whatever, the guy's done pretty well. I don't know. He's like right in the middle of bro. Like he's like, there's the far right, like crazy movement of men. And then there's the left, like liberalism. And then there's Alex Hormozi, where I'm like, I don't know. He wears a nasal strip, and I kind of respect that. But it was about the offer. And we said, what, Bryan, what does the offer have to have? What are the two components it needs to have? It needs to not involve what? So somebody actually wants to take that pathway into you.
Yeah. It needs to not cost any money, and it needs to make their life better instantly today. And, you know, the offer matters, but also who's giving the offer. Like, we keep circling back to this of, you know, people engaging with people rather than brands. I couldn't tell you who the executives are at Coca-Cola, but I sure as heck can at like insert MarTech brand here, because that's the circle I'm in, and also what they're cultivating there. Now, the new old kid on the block now is Nearbound, and I'd love to hear your philosophy on Nearbound, because, you know, as marketers love to just put a shiny new name on, you know, the same thing. Social selling is now just selling, but now we've got Nearbound, and would love to hear your philosophy on that.
Yeah, for sure. I've embraced the Nearbound method or term because it gives me a term that's familiar to organizations like outbound or inbound, but it's Nearbound. So there's budget for it, is what I'm coming across. But for me, I heard it maybe 6-9 months ago, and I had this sort of light bulb moment, because I basically have been doing Nearbound since the very beginning. I never was very good at the outbound stuff, even though I was an SDR, BDR, inside sales. Like I like my function was outbound, but I always did Nearbound. Basically, I found ways to connect with my network, with our partners' network, with our clients, that type of thing. And what I realized, though, is that as I just wanted to branch off and start my own business, the value that I bring isn't around personal branding. It's around sales with a blend of personal branding. And I connected that to Nearbound, that in order to have a Nearbound strategy, you as a human need to exist in a way that showcases your expertise, so that not only do people want to work with you, they're also more inclined to refer you because it makes them look good. right? And so that's what I focus on, is helping set the foundation of your near-bound strategy, the human,
Yeah.
but then finding ways to connect with your network that really accelerates all of your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can say for certain that my career would never have gone anywhere if it wasn't for, I guess I'll use the term, near-bound strategies and networking and cultivating the right network. I mean, Steve and I met through a mutual close friend of ours. We didn't meet in person until after 2 months of working together. Like it just,
Nice.
when you're recommended by someone that's like recommended anything, whether it's you need to talk to this person or you should look into this product or anything like that, nearbound works. And it doesn't matter what we call it, but fine, the popular term can win. It's the hashtag now. I'm not going to fight the power yet.
Yeah.
Well,
and as an example, I LinkedIn officially announced my business last week, but I already have 12 clients, right? And that was all just through Nearbound, that sort of type of networking. I think there's a beautiful blend between organic reach and then also paid ads eventually once you're trying to scale.
Yeah.
But I'm not there yet. I don't, so it's just, I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, of course. Like I think it's, again, looking at what are the pathways, and I think ensuring you exist in a way that sets you for success in a nearbound strategy, I think is important.
I have a question about measuring, right? We all want to measure. All these pathways lead to a central nervous system we call the CRM. What are you doing from a CRM management standpoint? And then how are you measuring all these input points, right? All these, call it attribution points. Because I'm assuming you're using a CRM, and I'm assuming you look at that daily, and that's how you manage your business. So walk us through that.
I'm probably the worst person to be going through this because I'm not the most organized, and especially now that I'm
Natasha, you got to hire us. Like, we don't want to pitch you on a podcast, but I'm going to tell you right now, like, we should just be like, Bryan, send the proposal.
Helping me out.
Yep, we're going to make you rich. We're all going to do well together because you've got like this spark, but you just got all the, like, you've got it going in areas, but we could help you so much. But it's good because you're just like everybody else. You're like us too. Like, there's things that we don't know every day.
If it makes you feel better, I know for a fact that a certain large CRM doesn't have a clean CRM internally at their own organization. We'll just leave it at that. Even the people putting the product out there don't know how to manage their own CRM.
No, I get like double time from them too, right? So I've been using Folk, which has been actually pretty good.
What is that? Walk us through Folk.
It's kind of like a CRM version of Notion. It's very, I think that's why I like it, because it's very familiar looking and I can just like drag things and move things around.
Sure.
So that helps me.
But there's and this Notion. Is where I go, okay, if I'm being me, which unfortunately some days I am, I would say, cool, like I can't integrate anything into that. So like from a tech stack and an automation standpoint, unless I'm missing something, I would build that out and say, hold on, time out. I'm going to put you on a free version of a HubSpot instead, and we can sync it with Apollo, because then you're essentially getting HubSpot paid for free. And then we can measure and do a lot of cool things with, call it automation and personalization on clay tables in the back end, and using intelligent personalized data to find the people who Natasha can run to. And you go, that's a lot. Geez, I really just want to get a few more leads, Steve. Like when you think about 2024 and you're planning, what are you investing in yourself with dollars and time that you weren't doing this year to grow your business?
Yeah, operationally speaking, I need to set the foundation of my business so that I'm not just working in it, but also on it, right? Yeah. And that I can grow it sustainably. Yeah. I just have been completely 100% building the plane while flying it, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't planning on launching in the business until next year, but all of a sudden I was like, you know what?
Yeah. That was how that was how my first year of consulting went too. I was working in-house and I was like, you know what? This is the year that I'm going to work towards this goal. And then I met with my boss and she was like, hey, you're in product marketing now. And I was like, well, now is as good a time as ever.
Right.
I got 3 clients, might as well just make a run for it. So I call it my voluntary layoff.
Let's talk about big impact stuff, Natasha, here. We got a couple more questions as we kind of wrap up into introducing you at the end, which is like the big opposite thing here. What is your North Star? Like when you're moving into 2024, you seem very intentional. What is guiding you there? that you're going to hold true no matter what? And why is that so important to you?
That's a really good question. And it is somewhat split because I have two big projects I'm working on. One is Nearpoint, my company, and the other one is I'm taking a more active role at a women empowerment foundation.
Cool.
And that's going to be a lot of overlap actually of who I'm targeting to join the community and who I can help as well. And so, yeah, it's kind of a great like business development and lead gen program for my business, which it just works really well. Right. But that's going to entail a lot of, if you think of like, I'm looking at it as like a sales quota, right? I'm trying to get a certain amount of active members in the community. And so reverse engineering all that, but I'm basically going to be doing that simultaneously with Nearpoint. So it's really just it's going to be having lots of conversations and connecting again, IRL and not just digitally, right? So that's going to be a big focus for me.
Well, let's refine it, because as my therapist would say, that sounds great, but you didn't answer my question. What is your North Star? So shit gets hard. Like you wake up, like, so what? What is keeping you going?
Well, I'm moving to California from South Carolina, moving back there, and I just got engaged last week. So there's a lot of like life changes right now that I'm going to have to start working towards.
There we go.
So I'd say that's a big kick in the butt right now.
Yeah, there we go. There's the North Star, right? So that's what's going to keep you running. That's huge. And I think what a cool way to enter 2024 with this energy, and you're building a business. Guaranteed 2024 will definitely slap you in the face at some time, because life is like that. What do you do when shit hits the fan? Like, what do you run to?
My dog. No. I've been on this journey of like self-awareness, kindness, meditating. Like it's probably been about almost 2 years now. And that's something that's been really powerful, just looking within and making sure I'm being nice to myself and shutting down that inner voice. And so when shit does get really bad, I'm trying really hard not to focus on the negative shit. Yeah. Like this last year has probably been actually one of the hardest years I've ever been through, but it's ending out to be one of the best years. So focusing on the positive stuff instead of all the shit that's still like weighing in on me.
If you could remove one part of yourself, what would it be?
If I were to remove one part of myself?
Yeah, not physically.
That's an interesting question. Probably the like, so I a lot of times probably have like a scarcity mindset, but I think that's totally okay within the pipeline. So I'm going to keep it there. But any other type of feeling of scarcity, I'm going to
isolate it. You push it down. You're going to shove it down.
Yeah, just pipeline. You're allowed to stay there.
Bryan, sorry I interrupted you. You had a question.
It's all good. I mean, it's less of a question and more of my usual verbal tick. 2 book recommendations for you. One, It Takes What It Takes by Trevor Moawad. He was Russell Wilson's mental conditioning coach. So if it works for Russell Wilson making like $4 million for throwing a ball, it can work for us running our little consultancies. Yeah. The other book is more on the Buddhist side of things, and it's Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart. Just life-changing book. That's by Dr. Mark Epstein.
Cool. Thank you.
Books are powerful. 2 that changed my life was oddly the same author, The Courage to Be Disliked and The Courage to Be Happy, all in the same year. Forgot to read them in order. Whoops. I find out that having the courage to be disliked is the secret to happiness. And that's sort of the magnetic formula. Is like when I was sitting in the, call it the shit show of my own life, and I had to really sit around and look at where I was. This is pre-meeting Bryan, just sitting there going like, what do I want to be? Whoops, business transaction didn't work out, lost kind of everything. And I think that when life does that to us, it puts us in an interesting position. Some people say, oh, you're on your heels. But I didn't want to get punched anymore. I was like, that's enough. Like, please, like life is hard right now. Like divorce, business failure, not seeing my 4-year-old like I did every night and going to bed with him all of a sudden, like, and feeling like you lost everything, and then having to really find, like you said, you're in good company. We've all been on a personal journey here too. And we talk about it a lot, right? And out of that formed this thing in business where my North Star came to me without anything that I wanted naturally, which is the point, right? I think meeting a guy like Bryan only happened because I knew that I finally had to give up control, right? What I was doing wouldn't work. And Bryan, I always say, is like an angel. And there's mornings where he hates me because I'm demanding, but I'm also learning that I was that way in my personal relationship. So there's a lot of time where I stop and go, hey, and I love you too. And I'm probably asking too much. right now. So can you please just tell me if that's the case? And all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my God, business and life are very much in parallel, but I feel like it continues, and it's almost this magical shit, Natasha, and I don't know you, but like just sharing person to person, when I've allowed myself to step away from the business and stop working 16 hours and working 6 hours, doing therapy 5 to 6 hours a week, listening to 20 hours of development stuff, holding myself accountable to my actions, aligning with my words, I can throw away the old Steve and say there was a lot of good parts, but we're gonna forget about the guilt of whatever you thought that was, and we're gonna look at those as lessons, and we're gonna look at this as like, now you've opened this channel, and I can't stop it, Natasha. Like, I've turned it on, and so many good things are happening in my life that, like, December, cash sucks. Bryan knows it, but man, we end Q1 and we've got 6 figures in the bank, and we get the end of 2024 and we're in 7 figures for profit, and we look at this moment of serendipity and go, holy shit. Like a year ago, I was sitting here just bawling in my basement going, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so I think,
and obviously I take full credit.
well,
for
Bryan
that.
takes full credit, and honestly, good. Because for the first time, I can look at someone else in my life and go, I didn't do that. And that's the point, right? So that was kind of my moment, and dragging you through the mud here. But like, that's how we came up with Magnetic, because I said, fuck it. I want to create a company that's just like my life. I want to be magnetic, but not by manipulation. I want to be magnetic by attraction. And in order to do that, I need to love myself first. And oh, by the way, loving myself is not about ego. It's actually about being attentive to myself, about being vulnerable with people, about opening up about things that I thought I was, but I was just ramrodding people with introducing myself and trauma dumping on everybody I met. And, oh, hey, Bryan, by the way, my name's Steve. My dad died 12 years ago. I found him dead. I went to rehab 5.5 years ago. My business failed. How are you?
Actual reenactment of the conversation. but as we're thinking about this journey of self-discovery, and that you've been going through, and like Steve said, we all have been, like, what does that journey look like for you, especially with an eye towards building your business? Because businesses aren't built in a vacuum. You've got all the drama of everyday life going on as well. So what did that look like for you, especially with, as you said, 2023 being the hardest but best year for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what actually started this journey, it's kind of crazy. Typically it's not actually because I was like, oh, I'm going to start like a self-discovery journey. It was health reasons. I suffer from migraines. I was at about 28 days a month with a migraine. And so I was a functioning migraine in the sense, like, I had to work still through it. And it got to the point I was giving up, right? Like, it was so bad. And so in order to find that balance, I had to kind of look within, because I realized, like, it's not just like, I stopped drinking, I meditate, like, I changed all these things, and I'm still feeling terrible. So clearly it's something that I'm thinking, right? Like, it's kind of like a mental block. Obviously there's more to it. I went like the full holistic route, and now blending between holistic and Western. But I actually have alarms throughout the
or CBD into your regimen. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I did. I took that out.
Can be the medications can be very serious, right? Like, they can help.
Yeah. I've tried everything. I went down a trip of ayahuasca even. So, which was enlightening in its own right. It did. Actually, it did. And
can we talk about it real quick?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a huge takeaway from that. And it's something that I've spoken with other people who have chronic pain, or anyways, when I went into the first night, I set my intention, right? You're supposed to tell her how you want to have the evening go, basically. I mean, she meets you where you are, but I said, show me how to overcome my migraines, and nothing happened. It was just a normal evening, basically. And so the next day I woke up and I was like, why am I referring to the migraines as my migraines? These aren't my migraines. I've put a possession on it, right? And so I've kind of separated it now, and I refer to them as the migraines, which like created that interesting barrier between me and this thing that I have dealt with for years and years. And that's just been a different like way of looking at things in general. That's been super helpful for me. The next night, the trip was insane, but I'll keep that one for another time. But like throughout the day, I have alarms reminding me to breathe. Even though I'm much better about it, I do find myself like with email apnea, right? I'm sitting there and just like haven't breathed for a couple minutes, right? And so, or just like short breaths. And so that's like the main thing. And then sleep is like the number one thing I focus on. That's why I actually stopped drinking, was because I didn't realize how much it affected my sleep. And if I don't have good sleep, then I can't handle anything.
I'm going to take a hard stand. Magnetic and Revenue Pathways think migraines suck. We're just going to go out there. You know what? At us. Come at us on X, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or wherever else people yell at other people on the internet. Migraines are not great. Not great at all. They wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. I would have to find a worst enemy first, then not wish it on them, though. It's always those ones where you just kind of stumble upon it, and it's always those small changes that compound over time, and those are the ones that are meaningful and last. What do you think aside from the things you've listed from like a business standpoint, what thing have you started doing that you think has made the most difference as you've been building your business?
I mean, at the end of the day, I look at like, what were my wins today and what could I have improved? I think celebrating the small wins, I know that sounds a little cliche, but like, I've been moving really quickly. I just have a lot going on. And when I don't pay attention to like, the first week, for example, like I closed a bunch of deals and then it was a lull week, but that's okay because I still had really great meetings with my clients. Right. And so paying attention to all the positive things that are happening, and not just like, oh no, I didn't close a deal, like getting that mindset out of there, because I am, a sales professional in the background. And so I'm constantly thinking about how I need to be on calls, but like, that's not how it works when you're running a business, right? I have to find that balance and make sure that I'm, again, working on the business, not just in it.
There's an interesting moment, Bryan, where I think it's, Nathasha, you were really vulnerable. So thank you for sharing. Bryan, you and I have talked about these moments. I'm 46. When I look back, when I was 22, I sat with a guy. And I was feeling anxious, didn't know what anxiety was, or the internet was brand new. There was, I think it was like message boards, but not like communities. And so like you'd get this string of people and have to click into each one, and you're like, oh my God. But I was like, oh my God, I have all this, I'm dizzy. I had some episodes of like seizures. It was bad, And I went to this one doctor who was actually a TMJ doctor, and he looked at me and he goes, I want you to do something. He goes, just take a breath in for 8 seconds and then breathe out. And I did it 5 times and I about passed out. And he goes, how does it feel? And I'm like, I feel great. And he goes, and I regret the next part. He said, okay, so I'm going to write this prescription. He goes, I want you to go to the don't research it. Don't look at it. Just take it tonight before you go to bed. And then call me tomorrow and tell me how you feel. And I went and took it, and I didn't think it would work because I'd tried everything, and I felt this magical feeling. I woke up the next day and I'm like, oh my God, it's gone. And 22 years later, I regret that because it was a benzodiazepine prescription that I took for 21 years and sort of ignored the engine light, right? And I think a lot of us, and medication can be very good, very good. You seem to find your healing without medication. I saw a study last night that said listening to a particular song for 3 minutes was equivalent to 68% of the number one SSRI for depression. Those stats are wild.
Yeah.
Because of the song.
No, it depends on the song. I said, like,
No,
can't touch this for 3 minutes.
I did go back to the neurologist and I found something that is helping me finally. I was trying to the reason why I stopped going to Western was because they're like, oh, be more adventurous, take a higher dose of this. And I was like, I don't think this is helping me figure out what the actual problem is, And so I was like masking it, and it just made me feel worse. So there is a blend I've been working through now. Unfortunately, I'm feeling better. So I think that's also
wonderful
why I'm able to crush it at my new business.
Well, that's what ends up happening. And that's the interesting thing. Like, once again, businesses aren't built in a vacuum. Your life informs your business and stuff like that. This is what most businesses are struggling right now, is because they are ignoring that root cause and instead are just doubling down on methods that just aren't working anymore. I mean, predictable revenue popularized back in, the early 2010s. The book comes out, there's the brand and everything like that. And it worked. It made companies hundreds of millions of dollars. But things changed, and the methods haven't, and the playbooks haven't. So instead of doing that root cause analysis, most brands are instead upping the dose, so to speak, and throwing an additional team of SDRs at it, as opposed to doing those hard work, like building relationships with your audience, tapping into your networks, building a network if you don't have one, finding those, 1,000 true fans, so to speak, and trying to really understand your messaging from there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, again, what brands are doing from that perspective and what they should be doing.
It's funny. I was just talking about the 1,000 True fans last night with somebody, because I was saying like he was worried about putting himself out there on LinkedIn and starting to feel like he's going to be this. He was referring to one creator who's like not as authentic as they used to be, and it's just the same old stuff, and it's whatever that was. And I was like, listen, you're not trying to speak to everybody. You're not trying to get thousands and thousands of fans. Your audience is this, and that's who you're going to be talking to, right? Like, you're not trying to please everybody. You're not also trying to, like, I'm not going to force you to put out something that doesn't feel right to you, right? And I think that's where there's almost like that mental roadblock or imposter syndrome that a lot of people are facing right now as they find their voice and figure out how to communicate properly to their audience, because they've never done it before, right? They've done it internally, maybe, but with, I don't know. I see there's just that huge disconnect in that sense. I'm blanking out what your question was, but I think along those lines, I think it's just really important to make sure that you know who you're talking to and talk to them. Like, you stop pleasing everybody.
And how are you helping your clients do this? Give us the rundown on Nearpoint and what that looks like, what you're usually coming in, uncovering, and then helping your clients solve.
Yeah. So I've been on this interesting mission the last 2 years since I joined Forbes Books and left them, because I realized when I was there, a book is really powerful, right? But it doesn't really matter how great it is if you don't have a community or audience you've been engaging with. No one will ever know about it, right? And so since then I left and I ended up joining a strategy firm where we help with big picture thought leadership, positioning, that sort of thing. But as I was there, I realized, okay, this is great, but now actually doing it and making money off of this, no one knows how to do. And so that's been something I've been honing in on, of this. I probably need to come up with a better name, because people don't want to necessarily buy training, accountability, and thought partnership, but that's what it is. So it's understanding best practices around LinkedIn, who to be connecting with. It's almost like business development best practices for LinkedIn. Accountability, I mean, again, I can tell you what to do, but actually doing it's the hardest part. And so having there be accountable huddles, we have weekly meetings. And then that thought partnership side isn't just around sales or marketing, but it's around those mental roadblocks I talked about of imposter syndrome. Oh, it's not about me, it's about the product, or I don't want to come off like I'm bragging, or telling, those types of things that we can work through to make sure that you're providing value to your audience and you're having the right conversations with the right people, because you could spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and get nowhere with it, right? And so it's all about being very strategic of who and how you're connecting.
Fantastic. Keeping those things in mind and being methodical about it. The post that I just sent out today, which, Steve, you should have read, even though it came live during this call, but I'll let it go this time. But my grandmother used to say patience is a virtue, usually because I was being an impatient little brat. But the CEOs and CROs and leadership teams that we meet, when we get to Q4, it stops being about the best practices and it stops being about the things that we know takes time. Building trust takes time. Building authority takes time. Building an audience, a network, a business takes time. But I think, especially when you bring it back to the age-old sales versus marketing thing, when revenue times get tough, the tendency is to revert back to those worst practices that we can all do, because it's, the 21st century of, let's just pull a lead list from insert data provider here and send them into a cadence. And then sales is like, let's just call everybody and send them the same one size fits all messages. We need MQLs, we need leads. And those things, like, there's that old adage, which I used to know the history of it, but it's often said to be a Chinese adage about the best time to plant a tree is 100 years ago. The second best time is today.
Yeah.
That's where businesses should be thinking about that. If you're looking to do these do a better job at building connections in the way that we've talked about today, you just have to you have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
because it's hard, and it's hard to push back against those instincts to be like, more leads, more leads, more leads, more leads.
Yeah. Oh, totally agree. And I mean, that system that a lot of companies are still doing, that's why I left all of it, because I was like, that's not going to solve our problem right now. Like, we're looking at vanity metrics of impressions and MQLs that, like, that's not what's going to get us to where we need to get to. And there are other ways of doing that. But again, it's a lot of times with the clients I work with who are business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, sales professionals, right? Like, they are waiting to have their perfect tone. They have the messaging all set up. It's like, you just got to start, because you're going to figure out what resonates, and no one's going to remember your first posts. Like, no offense, but you're not that important. Like, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I remember, especially in my self-conscious days, which was last week, actually. No, back in my early 20s, when I would get into that mode of imposter syndrome, the first thing that I would do was stretch the timeline. Like you say, like I was very much an introvert, and then I became a bartender at a retirement community, and then I had 3,000 grandparents. Not talking was not an option, but I would say something stupid, and the first thing that I would do is say, okay, is this going to matter in a week, in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 5 months? And there's kind of a weird catch-22 there, is that the things that your business does today do matter in all of those timelines. But are people going to remember the missteps? Unless, I mean, you can make some missteps when it comes to LinkedIn and social media. That's for sure. We're not looking at those corner cases, but it's important to just get started. We are both so grateful that you came on to talk to us today, Nathasha. Nathasha, thank you so much for joining us today on the newly dubbed Revenue Pathways. Where's the best place for people to reach you?
If you can imagine, LinkedIn or nearpointstrategies.com. But LinkedIn, Nathasha Walstra is my name. And it's been a pleasure meeting you both. And thank you for having me on here.